Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Wynonna Earp. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Yes, in the sense that immediately we found out Mercedes is alive. I'm like, yeah, because I said it last episode. It'd be so depressing, because literally this episode makes her third appearance in the season, but she was only in one other episode prior to last episode, and she made like a small appearance in that episode. So I was like, no, you can't make Mercedes pop up and just have her die like that. I was like, no, that's so messed up, especially after everything she's been through since season 2. Come on. And it's like, oh, she's still alive, she's fine. I'm like, yeah. We also find out Billy's still alive too. I'm like, yeah. It's like, okay, so everything's coming up good in certain regards. Which obviously you have Jeremy try to hold Doc back with that whole situation of Mercedes, and she's bleeding out. Luckily, Jeremy was like, if you're going to feed anyone, because I know who you are, Doc. You never want to feed on someone innocent. So if you want to feed on someone, let it be me. Because it's like, I'm not doing this for Mercedes. I'm doing this for you. Because the guilt would eat him up inside for doing that. And he ends up hugging her, and he was able to fight back his urges. And it's like, well, we need someone's strength to get out of here, which Freddy's like, I can't do anything. Which, side note, Freddy holding back Doc was pretty dope. It's like, and Doc being like, if I had to go through a werewolf, then I have to. But when it comes to them getting out of there, it's like, well, the bars are made of silver werewolf, so I'm just going to burn my hands. But it's like, well, it can make Mercedes a vampire, which they do. And I love it. She's loving it and everything, which even Freddy being like, oh, like, vampires suit you. She's almost like, really? Thanks. And it's just like, yeah. I forgot what she was saying, but she's really excited. She also said like, oh, she was kind of meant to be a vampire, which it makes you wonder how far, like, I would assume like they already had that planned out, considering the fact is like earlier in the season to be like in Eamon's bar without any issue, she pretended to be a vampire. So for her, it's like, and I'm sure for her it's like, oh yeah, I get to stay young and hot forever. Hell yeah, like Mercedes all about that. So it's just like, it's nice. I'm like, yeah, Mercedes. Even later when she's like, sire, and she's like, oh, there goes all my female street cred or something like that, referring to Doc as her sire. But other things going down, obviously we pick up with Wynonna and Waverly's situation. Obviously it's not technically Waverly anymore. She's kind of going full-blown dark side outfit and everything. And so Wynonna's not going to let her sister leave again. And it's like, I'm not going to let you do that. I won't see you like go away again. And so she blinds Wynonna temporarily, which Wynonna ends up running into Billy, which Rachel's dealing with the whole Cleo situation, because Cleo's saying like, oh yeah, the Reaper that went with her, yeah, it was Billy. And it's like, oh, like, Wynonna doesn't really care. You think she cares about you, but for Rachel, it's like, no, regardless of anything, she's my family, and I'll kind of fight for her. But it's like, hey, you want to save Billy? Because, obviously it's like, oh, that shows Jolene's dead, but hey, Billy, we can save him. And so, obviously, they ultimately do, and Billy returns back to human, and you're like, yeah. And he's actually the one that ended up convincing Wynonna to go back for Rachel, because she was initially she's so focused on trying to save Waverly that she was going to leave Rachel behind. But it's like, no, like, Rachel talked about you all the time, and he was like, yeah, I'm such an, she's like, he's talking about how things were before, and she's like, yeah, I'm an asshole, but he's like, yeah, but she talked about how things are so much better. So it's like, if, you have to do this because Waverly would do it, and she's like, nice job, asshole junior, fine, I'll go do it, which he goes off and says he's trying to find someone to help out with the whole situation. So many moving pieces at once. Obviously, Black Badge, it's like back at the facility, letting everyone out the cage, humans and monsters working together. Nicole made her way there, and he's like, oh, how can you work with these, you're a human, how can you work with these monsters? And for her it's like, this is a place of equal opportunity. It's a place that accepts everyone, especially from now on. No more just kind of divide between monsters. Also because it's like one of them's a werewolf. It's like his name is Freddy and he's my florist. And Freddy's like, I actually kind of would prefer being called Fred. And she's like, not right now. And it's like, but luckily when it was all said and done, which I also love that as Mercedes was leaving, she was like feeding on everyone too. So, quickly acclimating to this vampire situation. But Nicole was saying that she's the sheriff of Purgatory, and so, this is under her authority, knocks Graham out, and they all bail. But at the same time, like, a voice started reaching out to Doc, and at first I was like, what's going on? And he was like, an heir. At first I was wondering if it was Waverly, which I love that she shows up there being like, oh, look at all these humans doing all this stuff, and she lights up a cigarette. I'm like, I love that you're this ethereal, you're literally an angel just kicking it and going slow about things. But Doc was hearing a voice, and at first I thought it was her because he was saying heir, and I was like, is he talking about Wynonna? Is he talking about Waverly, or like what's up there? And I didn't know he was referencing the Clantons because she had, Cleo had plans of her own because she has Rachel, and I love the entire time she's got Rachel. She's literally just complaining the entire time about her mom. Just talking about how much of a bitch her mom was and everything. It's like, oh, I bet your mom was kind and everything. She's like, my mom was a hero. And Cleo's like, no one cares. I'm talking about me. I love that. Like, it's like, yeah, you're like so self-centered and stuff like that. But it turns out for her, it's like, she wants to lead the Ghost River Triangle, but it's like, she even talks to Wynonna. It's like, both of us as heirs, me, the Clanton heir, you, the Earp heir, there's no escaping the Ghost River Triangle. Because even when Wynonna initially left, life ended up bringing her right back to the Ghost River Triangle. So, like, there's no escaping. So, but for her, it's like, even if she did leave, the Clanton family, like, once you die, you become a Reaper. Obviously, Mam's the exception because, hey, Holt ended up, she ended up being fed to Holt. But it's like, her entire family's and her ancestors, not just her brothers, or her ancestors will follow her forever, and there's no escaping them. Like, just like that's kind of like the Earps, being the heirs. Like, there's no escaping that. The Clantons have another like thing to kind of proceed and kind of follow them. So she wanted to kind of be free of that. So her thought was to basically turn Wynonna into the enemy. That way, it's like, you will be responsible for killing everything and everyone you care about. But inadvertently, rather than turning Wynonna into the heir, she ended up turning Doc into the heir. So I guess, like, either she mishapped or, well, because she even said, like, well, Mam said I always had shit for brains and brains for nothing. So either she, like, mishapped the spell or whatever, but it went to Doc. He loaded up the gun. And then even Waverly came to him and was like, wait, you've had a vision. You know how this is all going to end. And he's like, yeah, but Waverly always talks about there being another way, and so he won't hand over the book, and he kind of teleports away and ends up wanting to duel Wynonna, threatening Rachel's life in the process. So for him, the Clantons have wanted their revenge, and it's like, this is the revenge. Either Doc dies or Wynonna dies, and either way, they kind of get what they want, because I think if Doc kills Wynonna, then the Earp heir is dead, and they kind of get the revenge in that regard, and Doc is going to want who pulled the trigger. But if Wynonna ends up killing Doc, then they still kind of win. So it's supposed to be like a win-win for their vengeance, is what it's supposed to be. But Wynonna doesn't want to like pick up Peacemaker, especially for her. She's like, yeah, it's always been kind of fun until this moment. It's like, now she's no longer kind of under the spell of just, she kind of, looks back on all the terrible stuff they've done. Like, in the beginning, it was just kind of like, we are a team, but now it's just so much with that gun. Like, there's so much death and destruction following it in a certain regard. So there's so much bad associated with it. So when the time comes, like, they do their paces, but Wynonna won't turn around because Doc will never shoot someone in the back. And he's like, well, yes, Doc Holliday, but I'm a Clanton. And in that moment, Wynonna shoots forward. The bullet ricochets off of Holt and into his head. But before Doc could pull the trigger on her, which he does, it explodes and backfires because he had loaded the wrong bullets in his gun, because he knew this was going to happen and he wasn't going to hurt Wynonna. And she's pleading with him because he's asking her to put an end to everything. Because what she was saying before is that, yeah, both you and me, we are fuck-ups. That's also the line I was thinking from Mercedes. She's like, well, let's fuck these bars up. It's like, I love how filthy mouth this show has got. Once again, I don't remember them cursing nearly as much in the previous seasons, but it's like, once again, this season got hotter, sexier, filthier in both, like, just the language as well as, like, the innuendos are up. New favorite word, wazoo. no shape or form is it a complaint. It's just something that's just like, man, either it was there and I just was super not noticing it until this season, especially this back half. Don't get me wrong, the first half of the season too, but this back half just seems even like, crazier with that. But regardless, once again, not a complaint. It's just something I've just noticed. I don't know whether they've just kind of like the restrictions on this season were just kind of pulled a little bit or what. It's just so interesting. But nevertheless, tangents and all that aside, Wynonna was saying that, yes, they are both fuck-ups, but at least Doc was doing his best to make up for things, because for her, she kind of felt like she was still kind of in her fuck-up ways, but at least Doc, despite all the mistakes, all the terrible things he's ever done, he was trying to make things right, And for him, it's just he wanted to put an end to everything because it's just, it'd be kind of putting an end to, like, because he's the last survivor of the the corral and everything, so it's like this will just kind of be getting justice in that regard, but also making up for all the terrible things he did, becoming a vampire just to extend his life because he was too scared to die, it's just one mistake after another. But even, at the end of the day, that's what Wynonna says, like, everyone makes mistakes, and she says that to the angel, saying, like, give Doc another chance. It's like, yes, he tried to change, but he has so many, many sins. But it's like, yes, he made a mistake. I made a mistake. You even gave up the throne. It's like, yes, because you convinced Waverly, me, to do that. And it's like, yes, everyone makes mistakes, so please. And so, using her power, she ends up healing Doc and ends up getting the book, which Wynonna was like, please don't go, like. But for her, it's like, this is kind of her destiny. This is what's necessary to save the day. Because, yes, all the fog is gone because it's no longer necessary. Because I think it was all, I guess, meant to be like a sign of when the fall comes, now that it's all going, because it was meant to be a sign to kind of push Waverly back to, like, yes, you have to come back because the door has to be closed. Because she's no longer Waverly. She is just in this particular form, just Julian, the Guardian's daughter. And so in that, she gets ready to leave, but Nicole stops her. And I like that moment of, like, it's like, well, fine, rather, because once we made the promise to never go away again. So it's like, yeah, you go there, I'm going with you. But it's like, it's not for your kind, humans. So she's like, well, fine, like Wynonna, she'll handle things like she always does, like the champion. But for Waverly, it's like, no, she's already done too much. Because this is all because, what did she say at the beginning? You've done a lot, Wynonna. It's let her have her turn, Wynonna. That basically Waverly's trying to save everyone, trying to step up. So the angel's kind of embodying her need to feel like it's time for me to step up and be the hero, to make the great sacrifice. So many people have had to sacrifice for me, and she didn't want Nicole to make that sacrifice, or Wynonna. But she's like, okay, fine. How about we do this? I'm the sheriff of Purgatory. How about we extend that to the entire Ghost River Triangle across all realms? I'll be that shield. And it's like, that means you can never leave Ghost River Triangle. And it's like, why would? I'm fine with that, because everything and everyone I love is here. Her family's here. So in that moment, it happens, and she makes her pledge to never leave the Ghost River Triangle, to be the angel's shield, because Wynonna's the sword with Peacemaker, and now Nicole's the shield. Even gets like a brand on the back of her neck. So many other moving pieces. At the same time the Clanton thing was happening, like, I love that Billy came to Nedley for help, and it's like, oh, the undead team, like, oh, you're back. It's like, oh, and everything, and it's like, any incantations? The moment he said that, and Nedley was paused, I was like, oh, you have no idea. He knows some incantations. Pulls out the book, pulls out the wolf mask and everything, and he's like, very Midsummer. And I love him being like, didn't see it, was a God, what's the word? I forgot. Basically, they're talking about being the monster he was for this past, like, 18 months or whatever. So they do the incantations. Maybe that was able to kind of hold things back long enough for things to kind of play out the way they did. We also just had Cleo bailing. I'm wondering, is that really going to be the end-all, be-all for that? I'm sure she has no reason to ever come back to the Ghost River Triangle now. What that necessarily means for Billy and Rachel, I mean, they can, obviously that becomes a conversation later on too, that they can leave. But then we also had the BBD situation. We had Graham coming up being like, oh, like, we need to get some help. And it's like, nah. It's like, I'm not going to help you. It's like, wait, you're choosing the demon side. And it's just like, So at the end of the day, like, their call is a call, and it's like main headquarters is like, oh, is there a problem? And Jeremy's like, nah, everything's good. Oh, Graham, sadly he didn't make it. Yeah, hangs up. And in that moment, Freddie gets the feed on him. So that's kind of taken care of. So most of BBD's kind of been taken care of. I'm curious to see what, Mercedes is going to end up doing. I guess we'll kind of find out soon enough. But, I mean, it is kind of a neat ending because it's like everything's kind of resolved. It is kind of a happy ending. It's like, I love the whole thing of Wynonna and Doc. She's like, he's like, I am hot. And she's like, yes, you are. You're the best. But also be like, you probably don't want to say that out loud, the whole like being hot thing. And every time they're about to kiss, like Nicole interrupts and she's like, come on, Nicole, like hot interrupting like the moment. And she's like, really? All the times it's like the irony being like you interrupt our moments all the time. But obviously Angel Waverly is gone for now. But I guess it's kind of saying that it's not going forever, that maybe that's still a part of her, that's still inside of her. Obviously she threw the book to the back inside of the door, and I guess that was enough to kind of lock it back. Like, I'm wondering, is that trying to imply like bringing the book back through? Because she did kind of see in the book, like, because Nicole was making the point of like, the fact is I'm a part of your life, I'm part of your story, right? But I guess like maybe the book being out there was kind of like a thing of like, oh, you're I don't know. I guess like it kind of closed the portal, but also probably like having Nicole being the shield also probably acted as a means of kind of closing that off, I guess. But turns out Doc has a reflection, and it's like the only way like Waverly would have been able to do that is if he willingly wanted to give up being a vampire. And she's like, is that what you want? He was like, yeah, I want a fresh start. So Doc's not as obsessed and as scared about, because being so obsessed wanting to live forever, he realized like how much it cost him. He lost everything because of it. So he wants his fresh start with Wynonna. Now, we never get an answer to like what that means necessarily for their daughter, like what that whole situation is going to turn into now potentially. But I even love Jeremy being like, I'm single, so I need like, seeing Doc and Wynonna, it's like kind of, I need this for myself. Which, two things about Jeremy. One, him being like, I lost, my love, Robin. Which I'm curious if there's going to be anything more with that or not. I mean, he was at that headquarters, but I mean, he might have been sent like to the main headquarters at some point in time for treatment. So we don't know if there's anything that's going to be done about that. Like, not unless he escaped during all that crazy stuff at BBD. There's also the situation of him like being like, oh, my junk is on, and it's like, oh, he was saying that it was him like having a warning for Nicole to go check on Waverly. So there was that. But I also loved him being like, but I won't let this happen to my brother, referring to Doc as that, which is so interesting considering like all the times he's had a thing for Doc, like since the beginning. So for him to be like, oh, my brother, it's like, I think it's sweet at the end of the day. But obviously Nicole and Waverly's wedding, and so it's like, hey, like I said, things are good. And I think it's so interesting because obviously next week's episode is the series finale, and where things are now, it's interesting because like everything's copacetic, everything's good. It reminds me of another show. I was debating this when I was thinking about it earlier. I'm not going to say the show's name. If you know what show I'm talking about, because there's probably other shows that fit this, but maybe there's one particular show that comes to your mind. Like I said, I won't confirm or deny what it is just so I don't end up spoiling it. But there's a show that kind of has a similar penultimate episode where it's like, oh, everything actually gets resolved, everything ends on a good note, and then the series finale ended up being kind of depressing. Apparently, a lot of fans weren't too happy about a lot of stuff. I mean, I can get where people are coming from because it is a depressing ending. It's like, oh, the previous episode, everything kind of ended nicely, and it's like, oh, then you like make the finale super depressing. I'm worried, is that what's going to happen in this particular case? I don't know. Like I said, where everything currently stands, everything's resolved. So there's still room for there to be an issue next episode, but maybe it's a thing that gets quickly wrapped up. It's like final showdown, this and that. We'll see. But it could also be a depressing thing. I hope the show doesn't have a depressing ending. I do know that they were in talks, or at least there was at least some conversations earlier on before this final episode started, that there was talk about trying to get this shipped, like trying to see if any other network would pick this up. So I don't know whether this is like I haven't looked in. Last time I looked into it, that was still kind of up in the air. So that these are still at the very least, these are the final episodes on Syfy. So whether or not this show ever has a future beyond this, I don't know. I mean, it also depends on the ending. Like, if it's a conclusive enough ending, because this might be kind of like The Magicians. Spoilers: The Magicians series finale was originally written in a way that the writers didn't know if they were going to get renewed for another season, so it could serve as both a season finale and a series finale, which ultimately it ended up being, in case they needed to be. So maybe this is written in that way where it's like, yes, it's conclusive, but there's room for like the show to ever return if need be. So I'm still kind of hoping in some shape or form the show does come back. Like, at least like one more season. I feel like there's so much. But then again, everything's kind of resolved. So I'm also like, that's a complicated thing. Like The Magicians, like I said, it was opened up enough to be like the story's resolved, but there's still other aspects to your life. I would like some resolution on that. But I feel like things are a little more wrapped up on this front, but it's still like there's still so much that can be done, especially garden related. Then I'm like, once again, that could circle back around to the series finale. So that's why I'm like, I'll more specifically talk about this with the series finale, or just depending on how things end then and there. But I'm really curious to see ultimately how this all plays out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.